In this episode of the Empowered and Embodied Show, Louise and Kim sit down to a soul-nourishing conversation about synchronicities, self-trust, and powerful transitions that are happening in our lives and collectively right now. We talk about the cosmic shifts, the importance of listening to your intuition, and what it truly means to align with your purpose. If you're craving insights on how to navigate your path of growth and find meaning in the moments that seem to align like magic, this is an episode for you. So go ahead and grab your favorite cup of tea and settle in with us as we explore how we can create space for transformation together. Hi there. Welcome to the Empowered and Embodied Show. I'm Kim Romaine.
And I'm Louise Neal. We're two transformational coaches who are also fellow travelers on the path of growth and self-discovery. And we're inviting you along for the ride.
That's right. We're right here in the trenches with you, navigating the ups and downs of life. And each week we'll be sharing our own experiences, bringing you conversations with amazing guests, and exploring insights and strategies that have helped us find more clarity, confidence, and ease in our lives.
And trust us, we do not have it all figured out. We're learning and growing right alongside you.
So if you're ready to rise above the chaos, doubt, and confusion that sometimes life throws our way,
and step into a more empowered and embodied version of yourself,
then you're in the right place. Let's get started. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Empowered and Embodied Show. I am one of your co-hosts, Kim Romaine, joined as always by my lovely co-host.
That's me, Louise Neal.
Louise, it's just us today.
I know. I like these little cozy sit-ins that you and I have an opportunity to, without a guest, to kind of get into some of the stuff that we talk about all the time. We're just recording it now. It's going to be great.
Well, that's kind of how the podcast started. We were like, hey, we're having these amazing conversations that people might actually benefit from. Why don't we record them?
Yeah.
So we do.
So here we are. So we just make it happen.
We just make it happen.
Yeah.
So, Louise, let's start like we always do. What are we celebrating?
So I pulled a card for myself today. So Kim, you kind of got me into the oracle cards and these really fun ways to help, I don't know, bring something maybe that I don't see. Kind of feels like it brings something closer to me. And I have a few different decks. And I was cleaning up today and I was playing around and I was like, hey, look at this deck I haven't touched in a while. Mm-hmm. And it's The Universe Has Your Back. It's a Gabby Bernstein quote deck. And I'm like, I wonder what this deck has to tell me today. I'm feeling really inspired and energized this week around some really cool conversations that I've been having. And I pulled this card. And so here's the card.
What does it say for those that are just listening?
I know. I was getting there. It says, I am the dreamer of my dream. And I'm like, damn straight I am. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Nobody else can dream your dream.
Well, not like I need a card to tell me that I'm the dreamer of my dream, but I kind of did in that moment to say, hey, what is the dream or what is possible? And I actually get to create that. I get to create possibility. And it was a really fun way. That's why I like these cards. It was a really fun way to find the language that I was searching for this week. And so I'm celebrating that. What is that? Possibility, connection to possibility, the language to help me explain to myself what that possibility is. It just felt really fun.
Yeah, I'm hearing that's a celebration of connection to self.
Mm-hmm. Oh, see, there you go. Yes.
A celebration of connection to self, a celebration. You could even go so far to say connection to source, right? Because you're getting information from somewhere. Whatever word you want to use there. Right. But it's that place of almost divine knowing. Like you said, I already knew it, but the universe, source, whoever gave me this card, gave me the opportunity to see this card today so I could have some language around this
Mm-hmm.
to remind me what I already know.
Yes. And that's what I feel like the cards that I have, that's really what they do for me, is to remind me what I'm capable of, to remind me what I already know, to remind me of the path that I'm on, to remind me of my values. Like, it's a reminder because I know these things. But man, it's kind of fun to play with the cards a little bit sometimes too. Um, so yeah.
I mean, I think that's the beautiful thing, and I know we talked about this early on in our relationship, and as you've been dabbling with it, it's oracle cards. Oracle cards allow us to get out of our own way, to see something that we may not have seen before, or to think about something through a lens that we haven't looked at it or thought of it through, right? So they are quote unquote divine messages in the sense that you're not controlling the outcome of whenever you pull that card. You were attracted to this deck for whatever reason, right? You were like, this is a
Mhm.
deck I'm attracted to. Today in particular, you were like, yeah, I want to revisit that deck, see what it has to share with me. So those are all little divine messages, that the little breadcrumbs, the little intuitive hits that you're getting that allow you to keep stepping forward into your own knowing, your own wisdom. It's not the card's wisdom. It's not Gabby
That's
Bernstein's
right.
wisdom. It's
That's
your
right.
wisdom.
Right.
She just
She
happened to
did.
write a bunch of quotes.
I know she did it. She did a great job finding the
Yeah.
quote. Absolutely. And it feels to me like it's often like this metaphor comes to mind when you pull a card for me too, or
Mhm.
when I do it. And it often feels like it's the drink of water that I needed when I didn't even know I was thirsty.
Yeah, we inside of my Rising Visionaries group yesterday, I always pull a card for all the different containers that I hold, and I had pulled a card and shared it with them, and it was the language on the card was, my ego is in service of my soul. And there were half a dozen of us on this call, and each one of us had a different response to that. Some of us were like, what the hell's my ego even involved? Like, my ego needs to not be involved. And others were like, yeah, I get that because, right, I need my ego involved
Mm.
so that I can move my soul purpose forward. My ego's not involved, I can't do it. And then we had this deep conversation around ego death and like all these different aspects from a single line that can have multiple interpretations. And that, I think that's where people who are freaked out by oracle cards, they're like, oh, what's that? Or it's too woo or whatever. I think there's a misconception that whoever authored those cards is a voice of God or a voice of source or voice of universe, versus these cards were channeled, and channeling is just is like really deep intuition. Like, this knowing comes through the person who creates the cards to write down these messages that you can receive at any time, and then based on your experiences in life, you get to interpret it however meaningful it is for you, or not. Because sometimes they're not. Sometimes you get them and you're like, I don't know what that even means right now. Thanks.
Yeah. So lovely. So yes, thank you for the language
Yeah.
around that today. What are you celebrating today?
Um, I, I'm celebrating synchronicities.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I mentioned I was in my group yesterday, and then later and so I facilitated that conversation. And then later in the day, I was a participant in a conversation somebody else was facilitating. Both conversations ended up having the same themes that came through. of and that neither were set up to have that specific conversation, but both had the I feel like a stewardess. My fingers are out like pointing like I'm a stewardess right now. Both had themes, excuse me, flight attendant. Both of them had themes of collective liberation and collective healing. And again, neither container was set up specifically to have those conversations, but that's what came forward. Both of them, somebody used a metaphor of the matrix and getting plugged into source, right? Right. When they're all plugging into the matrix, and this idea of plugging into the source and receiving, downloads is one aspect of it. The other conversation was being plugged in, which means we have a lack of freedom. So again, same metaphor, two different interpretations. And then later yesterday, I'm reading a book that I hadn't read in a while. I was inspired to go grab it from one of those conversations. And in the fourth paragraph, she talks about the matrix. And then in the 18th paragraph, she's talking about collective liberation. And then in the 19th paragraph, she's talking about collective healing. I'm like, oh my gosh, like how much of this is, right, the green car syndrome. When you buy a green car now, all you see on the road is green cars. So how much of it is that? And how much of it is, this is a sign of the times that we're in, that these are the conversations that we're having, including the matrix. Take that for however you want to. But then how much of it is messages to me, because I'm in each of these places. So like what we were talking about with the messages from the oracle cards, it's the synchronicities of all of these things lining up, meeting people that I've known for a little bit over, a year or 2 years, and meeting somebody brand new who went to college with them and didn't know they knew each other, and having similar conversations. So it's like, how much of that is what I'm receiving through these synchronicities? And like, I don't know why I have to go rewatch The Matrix, clearly, because 3 times in one day, I need to listen. The universe is saying, go watch this for a reason. So so I'm celebrating that because it's exciting. It's exciting when like those things that we're just going about our business, we're just going about our day, and then all of a sudden we perk up and we're like, wait, I just heard that. Wait, I just saw that. Wait, I was just talking about her. Wait, how do you know her? Like, it's just, made me feel really connected. Like all of the pieces, the webbing is filling itself in, right?
Right. Yeah. And not knowing the big picture, or not knowing exactly why, but starting to put these pieces together, and you start to see something a little bit different as the picture comes more clear.
And I don't even feel like I need to fill in the picture at this point, other than the fact that, okay, The Matrix got mentioned 3 times, and I loved that movie. I haven't seen it in a long time. Sure, I'll go watch it again. I don't know if I'm supposed to get a message from it or not, or just go enjoy it, but happy to go watch it again. Just like I had been thinking about things and somebody suggested a book that then tied into all of like, or brought up a book that I already had, that I had read many years ago. And well, I appreciated what I was reading years ago. I've evolved since then. And so now I'm reading it through a new lens myself. So I think in the past, I know in the past, I would have been focused on why. Like, why are all these things happening? Why are these synchronicities there? What's the message I'm supposed to receive? Whereas right now I feel like, cool. Yeah, messages are being received. I don't know what they are yet, but I hear the messages. I just don't understand them yet.
Yeah. Do you think that has something to do with like the more like just aligned that you are with like your purpose, and like what you want to be putting out into the world, that it kind of opens up those synchronicities and those connections?
For sure. Yeah, it's it's interesting because I still, when I say, when I give words, when I give language to the experiences I'm experiencing as I become more and more aligned in my most authentic self, when I actually put language to it out into the world, I'm like, who the fuck is that person? That, like, it feels right, totally right. And I'm like, yeah, that's me. And at the same time, I'm like, who are you? Because I'm still, it's like a baby first learning to walk.
Mhm.
You get so excited and you're like, yeah, I'm walking. And then you're like, oh, I forgot. I don't actually know how to run yet. Right. So yeah, it's a really interesting place to be. And I know we experience it in different ways in our life throughout our lifetime.
Mhm.
Um, what's happening now, I think because my awareness is so high, it's like my self-awareness is so high because I've worked on it for so long that it is almost an out of body
Mm.
experience. Like seeing myself evolve is fascinating.
You've talked about this bigger alignment or this bigger shift that's happening collectively.
Mhm.
And and can you tell me again how tell me again more about this, like this bigger shift, because I feel like you're like this microcosm of a conversation we've had before around like what are we shifting into cosmically? Is that the right
Sure.
language?
Yeah, sure. I guess so. I don't know. I'm making it up as I go along, kind of. Yeah. I think, I mean, I call it cosmic, the cosmic shifts, right? The paradigm
Yeah.
shifts.
Yeah.
Um, so we have the most recent one in November 2024. We moved into the what's known as the age of Aquarius. And so this is astrologically speaking. I am not an astrologer. I'm fascinated by astrology. But I learn from those who are astrologers. So my understanding is when we made that shift from Pluto in Capricorn to Pluto in Aquarius in November 2024, there is this shift from a focus on money, capitalism, Wall Street, even late stage capitalism, which we'd been dealing with the shadow of since 2016. No, it'd been for 16 years. I'm not going to do the math. 2008. There we go. I'd been for 16 years. Like, I think that's right. Um, And so that's kind of this first shift because now we're shifting into this place that we're dealing with more collective energy. We're dealing with more collaborative leadership. We're dealing with rebellion. When the last time we were in this age of Aquarius, it was our Pluto was in Aquarius. It was the time of the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and the
Mm.
Industrial Revolution. So it's a revolutionary period. We deal with the again, we're dealing with shadows of what happens when we focus on individuals and how they connect into the collective. So that's this 20-year period from 2024 to 2044. That's in my opinion, a precursor to this larger paradigm shift that through human design, through the study of human design, we've been for the last 360 years, I believe it is, we've been in the incarnation cross. There's this element called the incarnation cross, which is basically the life purpose when we talk about the individual. So it's the purpose of an era. So for the last 360-ish years, we've been in one cross, one purpose that has been focused on creation of systems and industries, and has really created these hierarchical systems, lack of a better word that I'm not coming up with right now, that has led us to focus on creating rules, procedures, policies for how community works. So how do our corporations work? How do our cities work? How do our countries work? Last 360 years have been focused on that. In 2027, we're shifting into the next paradigm shift, which will be about 400 years long. And that is focused on the individual and on the individual as the individual connects to the collective. So it's not about how the collective creates these structures to operate within. It's about how the individual thrives from their own inner wisdom. That's a big shift. And I feel like this Pluto moving into Aquarius is a natural like precursor these first few years to what we're heading into for the next 400 years.
Mm-hmm.
So does that kind of explain a little bit about, a little deeper about what I've been talking about?
Yeah, it's so interesting because we have these conversations here on the podcast and just in passing when you and I connect about like these systems and how I can imagine at one time, like 360 years ago, people were like, we need some fucking systems. We need some order. We've got lots of chaos. Like, let's put in some rules. And then people are like, yeah, I like this rule. I like these systems. I like this structure. It feels like it moves us forward. We've got all kinds of inventions and science and all kinds of stuff really move forward. And what I'm hearing, not just from our conversations, but what I'm hearing from my community too, and kind of this buzz or this hum that's going on, is that those systems, while they served us really well at one time, no longer serve us. And that it's time that we kind of figure out how to plug ourselves back in so that we
like
are
the Matrix.
Well, I guess so, right? Like, how do we plug in and make sure that we're not only contributing to a system that works for the collective, but that we're also like recreating or fixing any glitches that have happened since then. And I get this sense of like that's kind of where we're at, because there's a lot of systems that we have in place that just don't work for the majority of folks anymore. And yet they're very entrenched and very solid. So how do we do that? Right? Like, am I getting that right? Like, that's kind of how I feel, is like, it is the shift, but it's not like let's like go back 360 years. We're not talking about going back. What we're talking about is like, how do we now kind of make these systems more refined, make these systems work in a way that actually serves the collective and doesn't serve like a smaller part.
Yeah. So that revolutionary period with Pluto and Aquarius is about tearing down systems that are not working. It is about, we could say dismantling. We don't know if it's going to dismantle or entrench at this point, because sometimes when you try to tear something down, it digs in even further, right? That's yet to be seen. And that's part of this underbelly is, the shadow side of stuff. We don't know how it's going to play out. My intuition is saying it's going to be a challenging 20 years. So right now, 2024, 2025, 2026, we have 2 years and a couple of months before we're in 2027, when we start to shift into the cross of the sleeping phoenix, which that time that's focused on the individual and inner knowing. We have 3 years leading up to that where we're entrenched in this idea that, or the energy of, fuck it, it's not working, right? When we think of systems that started in the 1700s, 1800s, when we start thinking about that, we start understanding also where white supremacy, where the patriarchy, where like very misogynistic views are given steroids. I'm not saying they didn't exist pre 1600, they absolutely did. And they have been given steroids, right, over the last 400 years. And in particular, during my lifetime, I feel like in the last 50 years, it's like been insane. And that makes sense if we think about just thinking about like a toddler, right? If you tell a toddler they can't do something, they are going to scream and pitch a fit and throw themselves on the floor and be louder and bigger than you possibly could think that they could ever be. Energetically speaking, we're moving towards what's happening from 2027 forward for, to 2427 or whenever it is. We won't be alive. The energetically, we're in a death knell of all of those that are trying to hold on to what they've built and what they have been serving the few. When we go back to a place of inner knowing, when we are able to shift into that, and it's not going to be right, snap of the fingers, 2027, everybody has this. That's the opening of it. It's like the opening ceremonies at the Olympics. We just have the opening. As we move into that place of inner knowing, you can't hold on to those systems because people will just reject them. And people already have started to reject them. Now, many, many, many people are fighting against them, which is actually using the same energy of the systems against the systems, which just entrenches the systems, energetically speaking. If we want to shift it, we have that opportunity both with Pluto and Aquarius and then with the cross of the sleeping phoenix to do things completely differently, to come from a place of tapping into our intuition versus listening to the cacophony of noise that is constantly poured into us from the outside world and then becomes our internal narrative. That's not our intuition. Our intuition isn't that bullshit that's poured into us.
Right.
Right? So what comes up as I'm sharing all this? Like what's coming up? What are you hearing? What are you thinking?
Well, I find it fascinating because here I am on my own journey, really trying to understand not just my purpose and my place in the world or my place in community or whatever that looks like. I don't even know yet. And we've talked about this before around getting to be really good at knowing my intuition, at hearing my intuition. And as strong as I might think that connection is, you're right. It's all of that noise. Like if I don't know how it feels, I'm never going to hear it because of all of the noise that's going on. Right. And so no matter how much work I do on like who I am and what my intuition is, if there's still that noise, like I really got to be knowing and I really got to be like so intentional about what that is so that I can get through to the other side of this very noisy time. So that's kind of what comes up for me is like really starting to hone in not just on hearing my intuition, feeling it, believing in it, building my own self-trust around it, practicing it, like all of those things just become so much more important because we can't always control the noise. Like shit happens that is outside of our control, but I can control this. I can control how I'm practicing my self-awareness, how I'm practicing building self-trust, how I'm practicing listening to my intuition or feeling my intuition. That's what comes up for me. It's like I feel like I'm more in control of things and that I can actually make a bigger difference because of the work that I'm doing in this space right now.
Yeah. You talked about that place of self-belief and self-trust. And I think that's that is for sure a wound that a lot of people have is I don't know how to trust myself. Right? It's hard to trust ourselves because we're using a litmus test that isn't meant for us. We're myself included, we're constantly comparing ourselves to others. We're constantly looking and saying, it's the age old tale of keeping up with the Joneses and allowing ourselves to do things our way, but our way feels harder or scarier. That's that ego death, right? That's when we let go of what our ego wants. And our ego wants us to be safe. Our ego wants us to be cared for. But our ego is absolutely connected into fear. It's connected into, it's the matrix. It's connected into the messages that we're receiving, whether directly or indirectly or just energetically, that we're not doing something right, that we're not worthy, we're not good, like whatever that narrative is. And then that over time continues, and it starts really young. Like we see this with our kids. So when we can teach ourselves to, in small bits, trust ourselves and then connect in, and we talk about this all the time, connect into the language of our bodies. So we understand what messages it's giving us. It's a different language. It's not always going to give us words or pictures.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it telling us? Right? I've been battling this respiratory thing for way too long. And at first, I felt like the message was, I'm here to listen, not speak. And then I'm more hearing or more feeling, sensing in my body is that to use my words, my breath wisely. Because if I don't, I do get into a coughing fit. I start to feel like that spasm in my lungs. But I have an opportunity to think about and be more connected to the sensations in my body to be able to use what words I am using wisely. So like that place of starting with, how do I listen and know what my body is telling me so that I can start to trust myself? Because we're always going to get the messages that we can't.
Mm-hmm.
How did you start to work on that self-trust?
That's a great question. I think one of the biggest things that I did, and I don't know if I trusted myself, like I just kind of went with it. Like I left my job. I left a great paying job for like nothing. It's not like I had another job in my pocket or big digits in my bank account. I left that job because it wasn't working for me physically, mentally, emotionally. And I needed somehow to trust that I would find my way through that transition. I didn't know how I was going to find my way through. I didn't know how long it was going to take. I didn't know what was on the other side. I didn't know a lot of things. And it was super scary, but it also felt like, air quotes, the right thing for me to do. Like I just felt like it was like, for some reason, this is it. Right. And in a very short period of time in my life, in like 3 weeks, I went on a holiday, I bought a house and came back and quit my job. And it's like that knowing that I had that it was going to somehow work out because it was going to be different than what I had, because what I had wasn't working. And just in that it wasn't a moment, it was like a collection of moments, but it was like, ooh, like I can do hard things. It's like, ooh, I can actually get through this transition and come out the other side uh different than what I was before. And I think it was the understanding, or that, like, just that deep knowing is like, just lean in and let's go for it. I know enough to know when there's red lights, when I shouldn't go some right. I shouldn't take that dark path. I know that I can navigate this transition and I will be okay. And I think it was like from that I started to really kind of tap in and say, well, how did I know that? Like, but I didn't know it. Like, it didn't come from here. It didn't come from my head. And I call it a knowing, but it's not a logic. It's not a brain knowing. It was like a deeper knowing. And I'm not saying like the road's been easy, or I haven't, like, curled up in a ball on the floor sometimes and had a good cry because things aren't the way I think they should be. Haha, think, right? But I know differently. Like, I have a deeper sense of that. And so I keep coming back to that. I keep coming back to that. If I knew that and I could get through that, then I, my body has got a lot of information. I just don't know how to hear it. I don't know how to act on it all the time. I'm practicing. And that's trust, like trust with yourself or trust with someone else. Like, it's all a practice. Like, you got to do something to see, like, does that build trust? You got to put the board down on the bridge of trust and step on it to make sure that it's solid. You can't just look at it and go, that looks pretty good. Because you're gonna fall through if it's not solid, right? Like, so it's it's both the knowing of it, like a deeper, like, body knowing, but it's also a doing that builds that trust with myself. And that goes the same with other people. You have to give people an opportunity to do something so that you can build trust with them. It's super scary, right? Because they could disappoint. I could disappoint myself. But if we're not doing things, then we can't be building trust.
It's so interesting that you talk about the doing. So um, I don't disagree. And I think my sense is that most people, no, and I think like this is what I've seen from people and myself at a certain point is that doing place is as misunderstood as the knowing. We think the knowing comes from our head, right? So the doing, being an action, doesn't mean that we have to rip off all the band-aids or jump up and down with both feet on that board we've set down and bleed out everywhere. Doing doesn't like that doesn't help you. I feel like very often when we have that realization, like you had with work, right? Your paradigm shift started, at least this paradigm shift started with recognizing this work isn't working for me. I don't know exactly what's next, but I'm going to trust myself because I have this knowing, I have this deeper understanding. That was your paradigm shift.
Mm-hmm.
Had you just said, that's it, buying the house, dumping the job, and now 100% all in, this is my next thing, and I'm not going to take any time to think about it. I'm just going to do the thing. I'm going to jump up and down on that board and then like potentially fall to my death. That wouldn't have had a very good outcome for you. And yet that's what most people do.
Mm.
We have a circumstance, we have whatever that thing is that we're like, okay, now I'm either going to, right? This can happen when we've lost a job or we left a job that we've had for a long time, when we've, moved out of a long-term relationship, when we've had a health diagnosis, when somebody near us has died or is very ill, like these big transitional periods in our life. We have the circumstance. We go immediately to what's next. What is that next thing? Right? when we jump right to that, what is the next thing? We're taking, like, fine, I took a week, I grieved. I'm all good. I'm good. I feel better now. I saw my therapist 3 times. Check. I'm good. And then we go jump up and down on that board and we're like, it doesn't feel totally solid, but I'll just keep jumping. Maybe I'll throw another board down, right?
Right. And there's that the power in actually building trust is like in the time and the reflection that it takes, right? In the
That whole
container.
period in between that
Yeah.
nobody takes.
Yes. Yeah. There's a quote, I don't know who said it, and I'm probably gonna like fuck it up.
But
So I
somebody
won't.
said something and you're going
Somebody
to
said something, and then
summarize
I'm
it.
gonna mess it up and I'm gonna summarize it. So it's gonna sound like I said it the first, but it comes from somewhere. I just can't remember where exactly. But it's like we do not in any way learn from our experiences. We don't. We learn from the reflection on our experience. And I think we get that messed up all the time because we think
But you
we're
can see that in the
learning,
world.
right? We think we're learning and growing. We're not.
No. People ask all the time. I get text messages from my clients in the middle of the night, and I don't see them till the next morning. I sleep.
They're
No, I
about
get these text messages from them, and they're like, "Why don't people learn? Why do people work against their best interests? Why don't?" And it's like, because they're jumping from A to Z. They don't want the alphabet in between. Maybe they'll go A, B, C, and then they're all the way to Z. See, I'm still American, unfortunately. Well, like all the way to the end, but there's a whole bunch of letters in between that get left out. And when we leave those letters out, we're not reflecting, we're not healing, we're not, those wounds that we have may close up a little bit, but those scars can be opened really fast.
Mhm.
And it makes me so sad that we're not learning, we're not evolving in the way that we could. And that's what I think is a gift of this time period that we were talking about at the beginning of our episode. That shift, if we're shifting into 400 years focused on inner knowing, there's going to be a whole lot of people that have to slow the fuck down. Just like, and it will take generations to learn, right? We're still, it's been decades that people have been talking about the importance of rest and to slow down, to speed up, and all of these ways of saying, like, you need to care for yourself. And yet the vast majority of people in the collective that are on this planet do not operate in the world that way. Certainly not in North America.
Right.
Right? But we see it globally. It's really hard. And part of what makes it hard is sitting with discomfort. As humans, we avoid discomfort at all costs. And the costs are pretty high because it's our well-being. Physical, and mentally, emotionally, spiritually, energetically. Like, we're damaging ourselves by not allowing ourselves to be in the discomfort. And there's a lot to be uncomfortable about. There's a lot. And we're terrified of it. And so our ego gets in the way, right? Like, I got this.
Yeah. Okay, so they tell me about, because I know that you've been like having a brain baby and you have this idea of like it, how to bring people together to navigate some of this stuff that's going on collectively. And so I want to hear about your brain baby, your program, because it all ties into how to support this type of vision, like this type of learning and this type of growth, as well as this dismantling of the systems that have kind of kept us on the wrong path for quite some time now. So tell me some more about your program.
So, so thanks for asking about it. I appreciate the space to talk about it. I want to talk. I'm going to try and be brief. I think it's important to understand how this came to be, right? So, I've been studying this shift that's coming, the shift to the Crash of the Sleeping Phoenix. I've been dabbling. I'm not going to say studying because I haven't dove down as deeply to understand the Pluto and Aquarius, but I have spent some time with it, some significant time with it, to understand how it can play out, the importance of shadows, the importance of playing with those parts of ourselves that we very often keep cloistered away, right? The places of discomfort. So through that study, and doing my own work around it, and being in communities and hearing this craving for understanding ourselves so that we can stop perpetuating the systemic harm that we perpetuate just by showing up because we haven't learned a different way. I got these messages, these intuitive hits, that there is an opportunity to come together as a small group. I really don't want more than 10 people in this group. I mean, I would love to have more, but I think to be most supportive to those individuals. And I've created a container that will start in January of 2025 and run for the entire year. It's a 12-month program. And that 12-month program is focused on the energies that we are being gifted, right? So as we're recording this, we're in the midst of Mercury retrograde. There's energy, right? Woo! We all joke about Mercury retrograde. It's like the big one that everybody talks about, even if you're not like astrologically inclined or cosmically inclined. And yet there are real energies that impact us. Some will impact some people more than others because of their own design. And so the year, excuse me, the year is an opportunity to really peel back the layers of our own design, who we are, to get to know that through working with the cosmic energy, but I think even more importantly, the shadows of this Pluto and Aquarius, right? What are those energies? What are the what's touching the collective? And how does that impact me? And how do I show up in a way that allows me to train for the shift that will start to occur in 2027 of that inner knowing, that inner wisdom? So yeah, so that's where all this came from. And what my hope that people will walk away with from is trust. When we're talking about trust, that trust and belief to not be afraid of those parts of themselves that they try and cover up through proving energy, right? Which we all do. To allow a little bit more space and grace to be who they are here to be versus who they think they need to be. There's a whole lot of masking we all do. And this is an opportunity to take off those masks and to say, in a very brave space, in a safe container, to experiment with what it means to be truly yourself. And we're just going to use kind of what the universe is giving us as a playground to experiment with that. And really to come out of it so that they can hear themselves and trust themselves like they've never experienced before.
Yeah. And, like, wow. And this this program, like you as the guide, the facilitator, like
Mhm,
you and I have worked together on some of my my human design, my gates, my channels, but also like weaving in like who I am and
mhm,
how that comes out, right? Like, and really that deeper understanding and that deeper knowing of how each one of us builds that trust with
mhm.
ourselves, right? Because it is that individual like building block. It's like everybody's bridge of trust looks different, right?
Yes.
But we have some tools that can be really helpful to kind of figure out how to build that bridge for us. And that's what I love about the work you and I have done. It's not just like, oh, here, do this. It's like, oh, here's a gift, here's an idea, here's a word. What what does that mean? Right? How do you play with that word, or how do you
Well, what does it
play
mean to
with that
you?
idea? That's
Not what does
right.
it mean to
Yeah.
me? What does it mean to
Yeah, yeah.
you? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And how do we play with that? How do we like um uh, put it on, wear it? What does it feel like? What's the temperature, right? Like we get to do these things. And having that container, having that space is so important because it is such deep work and it is so vulnerable that you get down and dirty, right?
Mhm.
And pull all of those things up and be transformed on the other side, right? Like it's not just this cosmic transition that we're all going through. It's like our own transformation, right? It's our own transition, and really deeply understanding what that means to each one of us only comes from being in a small community where you get to be vulnerable, you get to try on things, you get to play, you get to be right, a little silly, and also like take so much from that learning, so much from that community, and take that with you and build your bridge, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. It is what you're talking about, and really I didn't use I haven't used these words before because sometimes when I say them I feel like people are like, what does that even mean? But what you're talking about and really what the trajectory for this work is self-liberation. When we can liberate ourselves, when we trust and know and believe ourselves to that level that you were just describing, that allows us to move to a place beyond self mastery to a place of self liberation, beyond
Mm,
self leadership to a place of self liberation. And when we can liberate ourselves, we can liberate the collective. But we cannot liberate the collective until we liberate
mm,
ourselves. And so
nice.
that is, yes, I gave the kind of like the cosmic coolness of what's going to go on in the container. But the purpose of the container is to begin that process of deconditioning ourselves and working through to that place where we are on the path to self liberation.
Yeah, yeah. It's all that noise we talked about, right? Is
Hmm.
like being in a container where we can say, okay, let's put that noise away. And so that we can start to really deeply know and hear, understand. And I use the word know as in like know our bodies, not know
Yeah,
our brains. But yeah, I love that.
cool. So I know that, so this is going to start in January, and people can find more information out on my website for sure.
Hmm.
Um, Louise, I know you're considering starting something in January that also helps people move through some self awareness, but particularly around work. Do you want to share anything about that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I will. Sure. This wasn't meant to be like, hey,
No,
let's
I
talk
know, but
about
I'd
what's
love
going
for
on.
you to put it in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, my work is really about helping people like come back to themselves and figure out what that means in the world of work. Now, of course, we're not just, right, work robots. We're like holistic people. And when we can holistically look at designing a career path forward, it really it just brings so much more to us, to our lives, to the people around us, and it has these ripple effects. And so through kind of values-based career mapping, that's about you deeply understanding, kind of like what we were talking about today, right? How do we deeply understand who we are so that we can start to find things and bring them closer to us that actually are in alignment with who we are? And as women, we especially go through this crazy transition period, just around what, perimenopause, menopause time. We start to feel really disconnected with our work because lots of things are changing, lots of things are happening. But to come back to ourselves and to come back to say, like, who am I? Who am I now in this transition, or on the other side of kids leaving home, or taking care of new parents, right? Aging parents and all of that. Who am I really, and what do I want from work? And so my program launching in January is all about, like, how do we do that? How do we deeply understand who we are? And how do we take that and use that to create and craft our own career journey? What does that look like? And how do we put that into, I'm going to use the word action, because it comes from and it comes after that reflection. So this isn't just about, let's dig deep and reflect and like have our values and like that's all great. It's like, no, 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 no. Like, now what does that mean? What does that mean in the world of work for you? How are you showing up differently at work? And how do you be more in alignment with who you are? Who do you have to cut out? Because sometimes we do, but then who do you have to bring in? Because sometimes we need that too. But that's the program that's starting in January.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I think it's important because there are, like I was sharing before we started recording today, the terms that get used are 3D and 5D when we're talking about the quantum world. 3D being this place, this very physical place that we live in, where we work, right? And so a very 3D real problems, particularly as you said, in a vessel in our bodies that are changing and do impact how we show up in the world. And we start asking questions of ourselves and have expectations of ourselves that may not be in alignment with who we're becoming, even if they were in alignment with who we were.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's very 3D. On that 5D level, right, we have this expansion and growth opportunity that also needs to dig deep, right? We need to understand our 3D and 5D capacity to be able to make this shift towards self-liberation, right? Which that's what we have in the container that I'm creating.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really important because depending on who you are and where you are in your life, one or either of these could speak to you, listener, right? just like they spoke to us as we were creating them.
Mm-hmm.
Louise and I are very, like, there's so much that we have in common, and yet we're very different. And our own paths are different. And that's what we were talking about towards the beginning, is like this place that I'm growing into. It sometimes I look at myself and I go, who the fuck are you? Like, who am I to be creating this experience that involves things on a very spiritual level, where we're guided to balance both that 3D and 5D space within us as we learn how to release all of the conditioning and learnings that we've had to this point. That is not somebody that I thought I would be at this point in my life. I didn't know that's who I was growing into. And that is absolutely who I'm growing into. And the vision of who I'm becoming is changing as I'm going through my own experience, just like you are as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That growth, and it's so beautiful to witness. And I think that's what's so cool about these two containers that we're putting out into the world. You know, if we had a guest, we would ask them, what do you have coming up? This is what we have coming up. And we don't talk about it that often, but I think it's really cool to talk about how we're addressing very much the same thing. That place of self-awareness and self-trust, eventually leading to self-liberation in two very different ways.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think it's cool. And thanks for
Yeah.
opening that door for us to talk about what's going on in our work.
Well, yeah. People who have, I don't know if you know this, people who have podcasts do talk about things they're putting out into the world often.
I
We don't,
That's just not how we do things.
but people
We
do
just
it.
I know. And I'm glad that we had this opportunity to do it. If for no other reason, like if neither of these speak to you, totally cool. Now you know a little bit more about what we're offering in the world
Right.
and who we're becoming as we offer it.
Right. Because that's the whole point of, when you and I came together, it's not like we're sitting here as experts or as anything more. We're in this place shoulder to shoulder with many of our listeners, right? As we're trying to like figure this out and move forward. It's like, how do we do that in a way that feels aligned, right? That's all I want for the world.
Yeah. Oh,
Right.
that's beautiful. It's beautiful. All right, my dear. So thank you, dear listeners, for giving us some space and time in your life. And hopefully you found some nuggets. I'd love to just quickly, as we're wrapping up here, Louise, what is a takeaway that you have today? I shared mine, by the way. Mine was this idea, and that's a really loud car. I apologize for anybody who heard that right then. Um, what I just shared was my takeaway, was this idea that we're offering this place of self-awareness, self-trust on the pathway to self-liberation in such beautiful different ways. And yes, yet we're both still working towards the same outcome for those that come into our world. That's my takeaway. What are you taking away from our conversation?
I love the conversation around, we talked about it really early on, is the matrix, and
Mm-hmm.
like when you're getting all these hits, because I think this was a thread throughout our time together today, is that there isn't one meaning for things. There isn't one way, there isn't this perfect way to do something. There isn't this, we're not all robots, we're not all coming out the other side in the same way, and that when we are fully aligned and fully self-aware and self-liberated, it's every person is different. Like that individual approach to what we do, it still lives and thrives. And it's in how we're interpreting things, our perspective. Like let's not forget that. Let's not forget that even if there's a program or you connect with Kim and you go through her program, you're not coming out the other side like right a mini Kim. Like you're
No, please
coming
God, don't.
out, you're coming out yourself. And like that's the same with my program, right? Like it's like let's truly understand who we are so that we can move into this next place in our lives ourselves and love and appreciate who that is. So that's my takeaway. That's just a
Mm.
fantastic reminder of like, let's not forget that as we go through these transitions, when we go through these things, that we come out the other side changed, but we're each changed in our own way.
Yeah. Yeah. You do you, boo. I mean, like I seriously,
Mm-hmm.
the whole reason we do this in all of our work with all of our different types of clients, the reason both Louise and I do this work is because we want you to find your way back to you, right? When we named this podcast, and we've talked about this many times, this place of empowerment comes from embodying, being in connection with your body so that you can have wholeness. And through that wholeness, you find empowerment within yourself to be yourself. And that is what we want for everybody. We just want you to love on yourself and feel what it's like to experience true self awareness, true self mastery. right? And let's get ourselves to that place of self-liberation. Because yeah, I'm like, I told you, all these conversations about collective healing, collective liberation, like I am down for it. Come on, let's do it. Self-liberate so we can get there.
Ooh, yes. I'm going to go love on myself a little bit now.
Love that. Love
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in today. We really appreciate it. And we will be back next week with another guest.
Absolutely. Take care.
Bye.
And that's all for this week's episode of the Empowered and Embodied Show. We hope today's episode has sparked something within you. Remember, we're all on this journey together. If something did resonate with you today, why not share it with a friend who might need to hear it too? You can find us everywhere you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're feeling generous, leave a review. Your feedback not only helps others find the show, but also helps us understand what's most valuable to you. Until next time, be kind to yourself, stay curious, and remember, we're walking right alongside you. Thanks for being part of our community.